mind, and the fact is, you mentioned some of these things like the bar and the car, and I don't think you mentioned the act, but the act is really the enlightened self that joins the ancestors, or joins Ra, the gods, if you will. But it's a little difficult to speak about, because you have to define each of your terms, and each of the terms need definition because they're symbolic of something else. It's not simply a verbal definition. But basically, it's a matter of understanding that the individual is made up both of spirit and matter. And the Ba, a loose equivalent is the soul. And the Ka, again, a loose equivalent really is the, if you will, the spiritual part of it, meaning the energetic part of the soul. So the Ba and the Ka, have a relationship. At death, at the time of death, the Ba leaves the physical body, and to some extent, part of the Ka relates to the physical body, because obviously, E equals MC squared, in terms of the Ka being energy and the body being matter. So, and you mentioned the what has been called the Book of the Dead, but that has been called that, by Egyptologists who really don't understand what they were dealing with, didn't understand it then, and don't understand it now, because of the difference in mindset. It's not the Book of the Dead, it's the book of coming forth into the light. That's a true translation of this book, which is one of the earliest book, really, in terms of pyramid text and so on, which goes back to 2500 BC and so on. So it's really a psychological treatise, or if you will, a spiritual treatise. But both are similar, because most of us are develop a mindset, again, out of our culture, out of our educational system. And it may take us away from who we really are as a spiritual source. And the spiritual source that we need to get to is what's called, the Ba, as opposed to, the mind-body complex, which the body is going to die. And the mind is really an artificial structure, because the essence of mind is consciousness, and that was possibly the last thing you said before I started talking just now. It's all about being conscious of consciousness, which is primary, and this is the African understanding of self. A conscious entity, a conscious presence, and that has to do with the Ba and the Ka, if you will, because it's an awareness, consciousness, as well as an energy. And
I'll jump in there, sir.
This is like Shiva and Shakti. Yes, please do.
Here's the thing. When Dr. Chukwunyere Kamalu wrote his book,
yes,
he suggested that the different concepts, the Ka, the Ba, the Ak, the Sa, and so on and so forth, them representing different aspects of the self. Dr. Akbar wrote the book, The Community of Self. And here's the point. According to Chukwunyere Kamalu, one of the aspects that make up the self is the destiny or spiritual double. Another one is the soul, as you say. Another one is the heart. Another one is the spirit, the ancestral guardian, the shadow, whatever. But here's the thing. Here's the point. You see, whenever I've taught that to my students, the obvious question that they ask is, so what? And I believe there's an answer to the so what. Here's what the answer is. When these different entities are organized they form a singular entity known as the person. That's what makes me, me, and what makes you, you. When this unity breaks down, we no longer have a balanced and centered person. And consequently, by having the concept of multiple selves, or as Akbar would call it, the community of self, if those different entities are organized and coherent, we have mental good health. And when they're not, we have mental ill health. And now, if that idea is valid, it suggests that one of the reasons for spirituality and spiritual development is that could be a part of the treatment of mental ill health. And if that's valid, then our ancestors were very, very clever people indeed. And that's the credit that we should give them for coming up with the concept of multiple selves. And that concept running through not just the ancient Egyptian belief system, but nearly all the traditional African belief systems. Now, running with that same idea, let me quote Dr. Basil Davidson. Dr. Basil Davidson said, and I'm quoting here, "Witch doctoring is written off in the modern world as arrant nonsense, but in traditional Africa, the witch doctor served a real and useful purpose quite apart from his magic. It was not unusual for him to function as a sort of pre-scientific psychologist." Mic drop, Dr. Basil Davidson. So he's seen the same thing. And that, for me, is one of the high points of what we can learn from traditional African belief systems, because ultimately it's giving us a notional model of how to model mental good health and by implication, mental ill health.
You're, 100%, and correct. And I may have mentioned it previously. But it's very important to deal with it from this perspective that you're talking about. The oldest story that has ever been told, and it goes back to 5000 BC and even before that, as a story before it was written down, is the story in Kemet of Osar, Oset, Seth, Nepsis, and Heru. Now, in a 1 minute run through, basically, this is what Akbar would be talking about in terms of the community of self. It's not different self, the community of self. Basically, what Ausar is the consciousness that anchors you to source, your connection to God, if you will. Auset is the consciousness that deals with your five senses and information that you get from outside you as a physical person. Seth is basically the energy aspect of it, sort of the car aspect of who you are. And Nepsis is the perceptive apparatus of the mind, perceives through the five senses. So then Heru now is the son of Osar and Oset. Story goes, that Osar ruled his kingdom, which was Kemet, and he brought Kemet to civilization. And again, it's a 30-second or 1 minute go through. Along with his wife, Oset. He then left the country to civilize the rest of the world. And the wife took over and was running the world. But then his brother, whatever, again, it's a community of self, it's a family, because it's really one entity. but because it's different functions of the mind, and this is the first psychology in the world. Also the first understanding of spirituality in terms of a way to bring about transformation of the individual. Okay, so Seth now is the bad guy because he's the energy and he wants to rule things himself. When Alsar comes back now after his travels, Seth kills him, and we're not going to go into a whole bunch of things, but he kills him, puts him in a coffin, and then ends up cutting him up into 14 pieces, and that's just the fragmentation, which is the psychology of ego. That really is ego, and his wife Nephthys, has been going along with the process. Now, what happens then is that both Nephthys has a conversion, so to speak, because she's seen what Seth has done. So both Nephthys and Alseth are beside themselves in grief, and they go all over Egypt and picking up the different pieces of Alsar that have been scattered by Seth, put them together. Now this is remembering. Puts together all of the pieces, remembers Alsar, and the key word there is remember, but in terms of memory, but it's done in terms of the physical body, the different pieces of the physical body, because it's symbolic. Each of them has a relationship with Alsar, which obviously, well, I shouldn't say that just yet. The only piece they couldn't find was the penis, which had been thrown into the Nile River and eaten by a fish. I'm not sure entirely the symbolism of that, but the symbolism of the rest of it now is Alseth has a child who is Heru. And Nephthys has a child who is Anubis, which is very interesting because Anubis is the symbol for transformation. And she herself now has been transformed basically from the wife of Seth. Now she's going to be working with Alseth to grow up Heru, because Heru now she's growing him up so he can inherit the throne, because Seth has taken over control. And just as you mentioned, think of it as a community of self. And this is a battle that's been going on, and it's a mental battle. Now the kingdom, if you will, which is self, is being run by ego, which is Seth. Okay? And but both Nephthys and Alseth remember Alsar. In other words, they remember the good old days when Alsar was in charge, which was, as you mentioned it, this balanced consciousness that was one with the universal consciousness, being one with God, which is how you can be at peace with yourself and with the world and everything else in the world. And they grow up Heru, okay, in the swamp and the Delta region, away from Seth, and now they become strong enough to do battle with Seth. Now, what that means, again, Heru is another aspect of mind. With the aspect of mind that is concentration, and has been brought up by those two ladies who have remembered, meaning remembering as well as understanding Alsar, which is the oneness of union with God, and they have taught him this, and now he has the strength, which is a concentrated awareness to do battle. The battle takes place over time because, as you know, transformation of the individual is a difficult thing, and you go forward, you go backward, you go forward. Anyway, he defeats Seth. When he defeats Seth, okay, he doesn't kill Seth. He defeats Seth, and it's a whole long story about pleading his case before the divine nine, 9 gods of creation, But we're not going to go into that. But the first thing he does when he defeats Seth and is given the throne is that he goes into what they call it the underworld in terms of the Book of the Dead. It's not the underworld, it's the inner world. Okay, where he resurrects Osar, because Osar has been, quote, dead or asleep or whatever it is. And this and the symbolism of that is he was put in a coffin and he was also thrown in the water. So he was covered over. Osar was covered over. So we have forgotten who we were and who we should be. And that's what all this fight was about. And Heru goes now and resurrects his father. He goes into the inner world. Okay, this is a major point. And he resurrects his father and he opens his father's mouth with an adze. Opening his mouth means now that your true spiritual self can speak to you. Okay? And he inherits the throne. He inherits the throne of his father. So here you have, Alsar who was killed and mummified and put in a coffin and thrown in the water, forgotten. Then he was remembered by a different, aspect of your mind, if you will, and then resurrected over time. All of this is really a significant meditation process. How you can transform yourself through this understanding of the psychology of mind. And now Heru inherits the throne and rules the kingdom wisely with the benefit of Osar's teaching that he is resurrected. This is the first psychology, and you can trace this throughout the rest of the Near East and the Far East and around the world, because all the spiritual traditions come out of that. All the way to Latin America, Quetzalcoatl and all of that, and all through the Buddhist teaching. All of that is there, and all through the Vedic teaching. It's much the same. So, but Africans are not being given credit for that. Neither the psychology nor the spirituality of it. And when the Europeans talk about spirituality, they say, "Oh, India." Well, it didn't start in India; it started in Africa.
Absolutely.
And it probably went to Mohenjo-daro and into southern India under the pressure of the Caucasian invasion, from Europe into India. And of course, it spread to China and Tibet, etc. And of course, Tibet also has a book of coming forth by day, or book of the dead, they call it. And it's the same type of understanding. So your point is very well taken, and that's the only way we can heal is understanding our spiritual self. But the only way we can understand our spiritual self if we understand the teachings of our ancestors. So we don't believe that the ego that has been developed within the Western system, because the Western system is based on individual and egocentricity. The stronger your ego is, so to speak, is the more you're going to be able to compete and beat your rival, and therefore be successful in gaining whatever, the riches of the world, the more beautiful woman, the most in the world, or whatever it is. Get your Nobel Prize. It's all competitive and based on individualism. And individualism is a mind-body concept, that is based on a particular type of thinking that is really materialistic thinking. It has nothing to do with spirituality. And that's why the Western religion really has nothing to do with spirituality. You're supposed to get your spiritual desserts when you die and you go to heaven. And in the meantime, behave yourself as a good boy, if you will, or you go on Sunday and you get your what do you call it? Not communion, but remission of sins or whatever. But the spirituality in Christianity was abolished in terms of the West, particularly since the Council of Nicaea. It flourished on the Eastern Christianity because they believe in the divinization of the human, and that's the African perspective, and that's where the original Christianity, as you know, came from. But and this is what now we have to get back to, as you're saying, this understanding that we're spiritual and physical, and that the mind is the intermediary between the spirit and the body, and it's the spirit that maintains that balance. And all mind is really the functional aspect of spirit or soul. And this continues in Africa in most situations, you know, whether it's the Bantu thinking, or you mentioned the Yoruba, and it's also true in the Congo and different places in Africa.
Can I go just jump in there, sir?
You get into Pan Africanism unless you have the spiritual reawakening, that transform our mind and how we see things. You can't have a true Pan Africanism.